Ready to dig deep. Today, we're talking about concrete.
Concrete, huh?
Yeah, concrete. But trust me, this is way more than just sidewalks and driveways.
Oh, I bet it is.
We're going to uncover some seriously surprising truths about concrete, like its history, its impact on the world, all thanks to Conrad Reicher's book, Concrete Truth, A Masculine Perspective.
I love that title. It's funny how something we see every day, something so simple, can actually have such a fascinating story behind it, you know?
Totally. And that book's title, it totally got me hooked. I'm really curious to see how that masculine perspective thing plays out in understanding, well, concrete.
Me too, me too. But before we get all philosophical, let's lay the groundwork. What exactly is concrete?
Right. It's a good question.
I mean, we all know it when we see it, but what's actually going on under that gray surface?
Okay, so it's not just like a random pile of rocks and dust.
Not at all. No way. Concrete is a carefully engineered material with a crazy history, too.
I'm intrigued.
So the basic recipe, cement aggregate. Yeah, that's the sand, gravel, or crushed stone. And then water.
Simple enough.
Simple ingredients, yeah. But the real magic happens when they react chemically.
Ah, that hydration thing I read about in the book.
Exactly. When you add water to cement, boom.
Yeah.
The cement particles start bonding together. They form this strong, crystalline structure.
So that's what makes it so strong and tough.
You got it. It's that structure.
So it's not just about the ingredients themselves, it's how they interact on this like chemical level.
Precisely. And what blows my mind, this simple recipe has been around for centuries.
Oh, I know, like the Romans, right?
The Romans, yeah. They were total masters of concrete, used it to build some of history's most iconic structures. Think Colosseum.
Oh, yeah.
Or those insane aqueducts.
I know. It's wild that those things have lasted for so long.
And get this, the book actually says that Roman concrete was sometimes stronger than what we use today.
Serious? How is that even possible?
Well, part of it was this volcanic ash they used in their mix.
Can of ash.
Yep. Reacted with the other ingredients and created this super durable material, especially good in tough environments like underwater.
Whoa. So they were already using like advanced materials way back then.
Absolutely. Makes you wonder what other secrets they knew that we've, lost to history.
Oh, for sure.
And, the sad part is we lost the exact recipe for Roman concrete for centuries.
Really?
Yeah, it was only rediscovered in the 18th century.
Talk about a lost art.
Yeah.
So did that kickstart the modern concrete industry? Once those Roman techniques were rediscovered, I mean.
It definitely played a role, for sure. But the real turning point, that came in the 19th century with Portland cement.
Portland cement. Is
Yeah.
that like the main type we use these days?
You got it. Portland cement is the most common type used today. Incredibly versatile stuff.
Okay, so Portland cement was a game changer. But even then, concrete isn't a one-size-fits-all thing, right?
No way.
I mean, you wouldn't use the same kind for a sidewalk as, say, a skyscraper.
You are so right. Concrete is super adaptable. There are tons of types, each tailored to specific needs.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, take sulfate-resistant cement. That's for areas with high sulfate content in the soil.
Ah, yeah.
Keeps it from getting damaged. Or you got high alumina cement, known for its quick curing and high strength.
Ah, so for projects that need to be done fast.
Exactly. Perfect for that.
So it's like a toolbox full of different concrete options, not just dump in a bunch of gray stuff and hoping for the best.
Yeah, nope, not at all. And what's even cooler is that concrete technology is constantly evolving. Like right now, there are some amazing innovations happening.
Ooh, like what? Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine concrete that can heal itself.
What?
Yeah, self-healing concrete.
No way.
It uses bacteria to repair cracks, almost like something straight out of science fiction.
Bacteria that fix concrete. That's mind-blowing.
It is, right. And then there's permeable concrete, designed to let water pass through. Helps manage stormwater, reduce runoff, way more sustainable than traditional concrete surfaces.
So concrete isn't just a material of the past, it's a material of the future too. There's a whole universe of concrete types and properties out there.
There totally is. And that's where we're headed next. We're going to explore those high-performance concretes, the ones pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Awesome.
But before we do that, I think we need to take a second to appreciate just how much concrete has shaped our world. We mentioned Roman structures, but concrete is seriously the backbone of our modern infrastructure.
That's true.
Think about it. Roads, highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, dams, all built with concrete. It's holding our world together.
You're right. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it that way.
And it's not just the big, impressive stuff either. No, concrete is in countless everyday things, too. Sidewalks, driveways, patios, retaining walls, you name it.
And our houses too.
Oh, absolute. Foundations, walls, even floors.
Because it's fire-resistant, durable, and can even help regulate temperature.
Exactly. Keeps us safe and comfy in our homes.
Concrete, the silent hero, working behind the scenes to shape our world. But with all this talk about how much we rely on it, what about the cost?
Yeah, good point. Concrete's a commodity, and the price can swing a lot.
Yeah, makes sense.
Depends on a bunch of factors. And the book, Concrete Truth, It actually gets into this in a really practical way. I found it super helpful.
Break it down for us. What are the key things that drive the cost of concrete?
Well, it's a mix of things. First, you have the cost of the raw materials themselves.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cement, aggregate, and water. Their prices can be affected by global supply and demand.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then you got to factor in labor costs, transportation costs for moving all that heavy stuff around, and even the cost of fuel for the machinery, for production and construction.
Sounds like there's a lot to consider.
There is. And the book really emphasized planning and understanding all the variables. Like, it suggests considering on-site batching plan.
On-site batching plan.
Yeah, that lets you mix the concrete right there, on-site. Cuts down on transportation costs.
That's a smart move. I bet it gives you more control over the quality, too.
It does. But speaking of costs, I think we got to address the elephant in the room, the environmental impact of concrete production.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that.
It's not just about the money. There's an environmental cost, too. And that's something we can't ignore.
Agreed. We touched on the carbon emissions from cement production earlier, but can you give us a sense of how big of a problem this is?
Yeah, so the cement industry, it's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. It's estimated that concrete production is responsible for around 8% of global CO2 emissions.
That's huge.
It is.
So concrete has been great for construction and all that, but it's also having this negative impact on the planet.
It's a tough reality. And that's exactly why it's so important to explore how sustainable concrete is, and find ways to lessen that environmental impact.
Totally. We need to find ways to make concrete more eco-friendly without sacrificing the strength and durability, of course.
Absolutely. And the good news is there are some exciting innovations happening in this area.
Really? Like what? Tell me more.
Well, there's a lot of research going into creating more sustainable types of cement. One really promising approach is using alternative materials, like fly ash and slag.
Fly ash and slag?
They're byproducts from other industries.
Interesting.
And these materials can partially replace the cement in the mix, which means you need less cement, which means a lower carbon footprint.
Oh, smart. So we're basically turning waste from other industries into a valuable resource.
Yep, that's exactly what's happening.
That's awesome.
And it's not just about doing less harm. These materials can actually make the concrete perform better in some cases.
How so?
Well, fly ash, for example.
Yeah.
It can improve how easily the concrete flows and how long it lasts.
So it's about actually improving concrete through these sustainable practices. That's great.
I think so too. And there are other strategies as well, like using recycled aggregates in the mix.
Right.
That reduces the need to dig up new materials, which obviously can really harm the environment.
For sure. Less mining means less habitat destruction, less energy used, less pollution overall.
Exactly. It's all connected. And there's another cool development in the works, carbon capture technology.
I've heard about this. Isn't that where they capture the CO2 from cement plants and store it somewhere else?
Yep, like reversing the problem at the source. The tech is still pretty new, but it's got huge potential.
Sounds almost too good to be true. So are we talking about a future where concrete could actually be carbon neutral?
That's the dream. It's a massive challenge, but researchers and engineers are working hard to make it happen. And it's not just about emissions during production either.
What else is there?
But we also need to think about the whole life cycle of a concrete structure.
Life cycle. What does that mean?
Well, it's everything from getting those raw materials to building with it, using the building, and even what happens to the concrete when the building's done.
So it's about being sustainable at every stage.
You got it. Like, for example, designing buildings that are more energy efficient.
Yeah.
That means less heating and cooling, which indirectly cuts down on the carbon footprint of the concrete used to build it.
Makes sense. It's about thinking in terms of these big systems.
Yeah.
But what about when a building is demolished? What happens to all that concrete then?
That's a big question. And, demolition and getting rid of concrete can be a big environmental problem if it's not handled right. But good news, concrete can be recycled.
Wait, you can recycle concrete?
Oh, yeah. You crush it up, and then that crushed concrete, called recycled aggregate, can be used instead of brand new aggregate in fresh concrete mixes.
Or like giving that concrete a second life instead of just dumping it in a landfill.
Exact. And using recycled aggregate not only means we need less new materials, but it also cuts down on those transportation emissions because the recycled stuff is often sourced locally.
That's fantastic. So we're talking about a circular economy for concrete where it's constantly being reused and repurposed.
That's the goal. It's about closing the loop, minimizing waste.
And it's not just good for the environment, but it makes economic sense too.
Totally. Less waste means we need less space for landfills, and using recycled stuff is often cheaper than getting new material. Win-win.
A win for the environment and the economy.
Exactly. It's about finding those solutions that are both sustainable and economically viable.
After all this talk about concrete, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic about the future.
Me too.
It's amazing to see how much innovation and progress is happening.
It is inspiring to see how this basic material, something most people never think twice about, could play a big part in building a better future.
It really is. I'm starting to see concrete in a whole new light. It's
Yeah.
not just a building material. It's a material that can help us solve some of our biggest challenges.
I agree, and that's what makes this whole field so exciting. There's so much happening, driven by this common goal to make the world a better place.
Well, this conversation has definitely given me a new appreciation for concrete. It's amazing to see how something so ordinary can be a part of the solution.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for more concrete talk. Last time, we went through some history, talked about concrete's impact, and even touched on those unexpected uses in war and art.
It's wild, right? Something we see every day and never really think about has this whole crazy story.
Totally. And like we promised, we're going even deeper into the science behind concrete.
Sweet. Let's get technical. We talked about that chemical reaction, hydration, right? Can we break that down a little more? I want to understand the chemistry behind concrete's strength.
Absolutely. Remember our basic ingredients.
Cement, aggregate, and water.
You got it. So when you add water to cement, it kicks off this whole chemical reaction. The cement particles start bonding together, forming this crystalline structure.
So it's like the cement creates a web, trapping the aggregate and holding everything tight.
That's a great way to think about it. As this crystalline structure grows, the concrete hardens and gets stronger. We call this curing.
Curing, right. So the longer it cures, the tougher it gets.
Exactly. Curing is super important for getting that strong, durable concrete we need. It's like baking a cake. You can't rush it or it won't set right.
That makes sense. It needs time to reach its full potential.
Right.
What about all those different types of concrete we talked about? Do they all cure the same way?
Great question. The basic curing process is pretty similar across the board, but the exact time and conditions can vary.
How so?
Well, it depends on things like the type of cement, how it's mixed, even the weather.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
No, each type has its quirks. For example, remember high alumina cement?
Yeah, the fast-curing one.
Right. It cures way faster than regular Portland cement. Like within a few hours, it can be super strong.
Huh, interesting. Okay, so there's more to it than just mixing stuff and waiting. But let's get back to those different types of concrete.
Sure.
We mentioned sulfate-resistant and high alumina. What other kinds are out there, and what makes them unique?
Oh man, there's a whole bunch. Concrete is incredibly diverse. You've got air entrained concrete, for example.
Air and train. What's that?
It's got these tiny air bubbles trapped inside.
Tiny air bubble. Why?
Makes it resistant to freezing and thawing. Super important in cold climates.
Oh, right. So the water inside doesn't freeze and crack the concrete.
Exactly. Those air bubbles are like little shock absorbers. Then there's fiber reinforced concrete.
What's that one do?
It's got fibers mixed in, like steel or glass, to make it stronger and more flexible.
Ah, so it's reinforced, like adding rebar, but on a smaller scale.
You got it. They use it a lot in things like bridges and tunnels where you need extra strength.
Makes sense. And then you've got those high-performance concretes, right?
Right. That's a whole category of its own.
What makes them so special?
They have enhanced properties like crazy strength, durability, and workability. It's cutting-edge stuff.
High-performance concrete? That sounds impressive. What are some examples?
Well, there's self-consolidating concrete. It flows super easily into complicated shapes without needing any vibration.
So no more messing with those giant vibrating tools.
Exact. Makes construction smoother and opens up a lot of design possibility. And then there's shotcrete.
Shotcrete, what's that?
It's concrete that's sprayed onto surfaces at high speed,
Wow.
often used in tunnels and for stabilizing slopes where regular pouring wouldn't work.
Shotcrete sounds kind of dangerous.
It can be, yeah, but it's also super efficient.
Huh, so many different types. I'm starting to get a sense of how diverse concrete really is. It's like there's a concrete for every job. But honestly, I'm still most fascinated by those high-tech concretes you mentioned earlier.
Like self-healing concrete.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Tell me more about how that works.
Okay, so imagine this. You mix special bacteria right into the concrete.
Bacteria in concrete.
Yep. And when a crack forms, these bacteria are triggered. They wake up and start producing calcium carbonate.
And what does calcium carbonate do?
It basically fills in the crack like a natural bandage.
So the bacteria actually repair the damage.
They do. It's a real technology, and it could totally change how we build things. Imagine bridges that fix themselves, or buildings that need way less maintenance.
That would be incredible. Think of all the time, money, and resources we could save.
Exactly. And then there's permeable concrete, remember? Lets water flow right through.
Right, that's good for stormwater runoff.
It is, but it also helps cool down cities.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that. How does that work?
Well, regular concrete soaks up heat from the sun, making cities hotter. Permeable concrete lets water evaporate through it, and that cools things down.
So it's good for the environment and makes cities more comfortable. That's a win-win. Are there any other cool concrete innovations you're excited about?
Oh, tons. But one that really blows my mind is 3D printing with concrete.
3D printing with concrete. That's a thing.
It is, and it could totally revolutionized construction.
So,
Well, imagine printing entire buildings right on the construction site.
no way.
Less waste, less transportation, faster build time.
That would be amazing. The future of concrete sounds pretty incredible. But with all this cool stuff, we can't forget about the environmental challenges.
You're right. In fact, a lot of these innovations are driven by the need to find more sustainable solutions.
Right. We talked about the carbon footprint of concrete production. So, how do we make it more eco-friendly?
Well, one big step is reducing the amount of cement we use. Remember, making cement is the most energy-intensive part and creates most of the emissions.
So, how do we use less cement without making the concrete weaker?
That's where those alternative materials come in. Fly ash, slag, silica fume.
The industrial byproducts?
Exactly. They can replace some of the cement in the mix, meaning we need to make less new cement.
So it's like turning waste into a valuable resource.
Right. And it's not just about cutting emissions either. Sometimes these materials actually make the concrete better.
Really?
Fly ash, for example, can improve workability and durability.
So it's not just about doing less harm. It's about making concrete better through sustainability.
Exactly. And there are other things we can do too, like using recycled aggregates.
Right.
That means less need to mine new materials, which is a big win for the environment.
Less mining, less habitat destruction, less energy use, less pollution.
You got it. And there's this new technology on the horizon that's super exciting, carbon capture.
Oh, yeah. They're actually catching the CO2 from the cement plants.
Yeah, it's like undoing the problem right at the source.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are we talking about a future where concrete is actually carbon neutral?
That's the ultimate goal. It's a huge challenge, but it's what everyone is working towards.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But it's not just about those emissions during production, right? You mentioned something about a life cycle.
Right. We need to think about the whole life cycle of concrete structures.
Remind me what that means again.
It's thinking about everything. Getting them the raw materials, building with concrete, using the building, and what happens to the concrete at the very end.
So it's like a big picture view of sustainability.
Exact. For example, designing buildings that are super energy efficient.
Yeah, that's important.
That means less need for heating and cooling, which indirectly means a smaller carbon footprint, even if the concrete itself wasn't super eco-friendly.
It's all connected. So what about at the end of a building's life? What happens to all that concrete when they tear it down?
That's a great question. And, demolition and disposal can be a real environmental headache if it's not done right.
Yeah, it's a lot of waste.
But the good news is concrete can be recycled.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. They crush it up, and that crushed concrete, we call it recycled aggregate, can be used instead of brand new aggregate in fresh concrete.
So it gets a second life. That's awesome.
It is. And using recycled aggregate means we need less new material, and it often means less transportation too, because it's usually sourced locally.
So it's better for the environment and the economy.
You got it. Win-win.
It sounds like a circular economy for concrete, constantly reusing and repurposing it.
Exactly. It's about closing that loop and cutting down on waste as much as possible.
This is awesome. I'm starting to see concrete in a whole new light. It's not just this boring building material. It's something that could actually help us build a more sustainable.
I completely agree. That's what makes it so exciting to talk about.
Well, I'm definitely feeling a lot more optimistic about the future now. It's inspiring to see how much progress is being made. Welcome back to our concrete deep dive. I feel like we've been on a wild ride exploring this hidden world.
Hey, concrete is full of surprises, and we still got more ground to cover.
For sure.
Yep.
Last time we were talking about those amazing sustainable concrete solutions.
Yeah, all the progress is pretty exciting, right?
It is. It seems like the concrete industry is really trying to find new ways to be eco-friendly.
Absolutely. And one of the main things they're focused on is lowering those carbon emissions from production.
Right, because making cement is the biggest problem, emissions-wise.
Exact. So what can we do about it? Well, one thing that's becoming more popular is using different fuels in the cement kilns.
The free fuel.
Yeah, usually those kilns use fossil fuels, like coal,
Right.
but more and more, they're switching to stuff like biomass or even waste material.
Oh, so instead of burning coal, they're using renewable resource.
Yep, or even stuff that would have ended up in a landfill. It's a smart way to cut down on emissions.
Totally. And it's not just about what they burn, right? You were saying there's research on new types of cement that are better for the environment.
Oh yeah, like those alternative cements we talked about, the ones using fly ash and slag.
All right, those are great.
They are. And there are other innovations in cement chemistry that are looking really promising.
Like what?
Well, some researchers are working on cements that actually absorb CO2 while they're curing.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, imagine that. Concrete actually sucking CO2 out of the air.
That's wild. Concrete that fights climate change. That's awesome.
It's still early days, but it's definitely something to get excited about. It could be a game changer for the future of concrete.
I hope so. All this ingenuity is incredible. And it's not just about the cement itself, right? Designing buildings that are more energy efficient helps too.
You got it. The less energy a building needs for heating and cooling, the less its impact on the environment. Even if the concrete used to build it wasn't super eco-friendly to begin with.
So true. Everything is connected. The way we design and build has a big impact overall.
That's why it's so important to think about the whole life cycle of concrete.
Right, from the materials to how it's disposed of.
Exactly. And speaking of disposal, we talked about recycling concrete.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Sure. So when a concrete structure is at the end of its life, they demolish it and crush it into smaller pieces.
Okay.
And then that crushed concrete, called recycled aggregate, can be used instead of new aggregate in fresh concrete mixes.
Oh, that's cool. So it doesn't just go to waste.
No, it's like giving it a whole second life.
And that means less demand for brand new materials, right?
Exactly. And it usually means less transportation, too, since the recycled stuff often comes from nearby.
Okay, so it's better for the environment and saves money, too.
Yep, win-win.
I love it. A circular economy for concrete.
Exactly. It's all about closing that loop and making the most of what we have.
This has been amazing. I'm seriously blown away by all the innovation and progress in the concrete industry. I feel a lot more optimistic about the future.
Me too. It's inspiring to see how concrete can be part of the solution to those big environmental challenges.
If you're as fascinated by concrete as we are, I definitely recommend checking out Concrete Truth, A Masculine Perspective by Conrad Riker. It's an eye-opening read.
I agree. It really changes how you think about concrete.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. And that brings us to the end of our concrete deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep an eye out for concrete in your everyday life. You might be surprised by what you notice now.